Welcome to the Farming on Purpose podcast, a podcast for farmers and ranchers ready to shift for a stronger future. Today's challenges in agriculture are new, but the grit and determination required to be successful are not. On the Farming on Purpose podcast, you'll hear how producers of all sizes and practices are moving mountains for things they believe in, all in the name of an industry that keeps growing and innovating for a stronger food system and stronger farm families. I'm your host, Lexi Wright, and I'm excited to discuss where producers are finding success, challenging the status quo, striving for better, and keeping our heritage alive, all while producing the food we depend on.
Welcome back to Farming on Purpose. I'm so excited to announce that we have officially hit our 100th episode, and to celebrate, we're going to be giving away some fun things. So between now and December 31st, if you leave a review on Apple Podcasts or share any of our posts to your Instagram story and tag us, then you can be entered. We're going to be giving away Farming on Purpose merch, as well as 2 children's books that I love. One of them is called A Day on the Farm with Mama, and the other is Charlie Learns to Be a Cowboy. And these are both written by real farm and ranch women. I just want to say thank you to everyone who has listened and supported the podcast to this point, and I'm really looking forward to our next 100 episodes, where we're going to continue to interview people in agriculture who have found success in their business and in their personal life experience on the farm, and continue to identify ways that we can serve you, our listeners, in building stronger farm families, stronger food systems, and stronger rural legacies. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to Farming on Purpose and our 100th episode. I just want to take a short minute here to celebrate this milestone and say a very special thank you to my editor, Kylie, who has been with me throughout almost all of this journey of beginning the podcast, and whom I could not have done this without. So thank you, Kylie. She's a rock star editor, and I'm very grateful that she is willing to deal with my crazy schedule and sometimes crazy schemes on the podcast. So could not have done it without you. So I'm sure she is debating editing this part out as we speak. But I did not ever really think about, when I started this podcast, about how far or how long it would go. I knew I wanted to start a podcast, and the milestone of 100 episodes had never really crossed my mind until a couple months ago. I saw in a Facebook group that I'm in for marketing agency people that one they were a podcast editor, and one of their clients had recently decided that when they reached their 100th episode, they were going to stop their podcast. And there was several podcast editors chiming in and saying this is a really common thing in the industry that they all watch out for, and that, they lose work when their podcaster decides to stop the podcast at 100 episodes. And that was like a goal that they were trying to achieve. And so first off, I want to say we are not stopping the podcast at 100 episodes. But that got me really thinking about, what is the timeline of this podcast? What are we doing here? What is the importance of how we're spending our time here? And so as I thought about that, I thought, do I want to continue on? Do we need to keep creating the Farming on Purpose podcast past 100 episodes? And the answer was yes. But it was kind of a crossroads for me. I'd never really thought about how hard the journey of creating and maintaining this podcast has been kind of a bumpy road. It is not something that I make any money from. It is not something that fits naturally into my schedule, I would say, as a business owner and a parent and helping out on the farm. It's something I definitely have to consciously create time and energy and space for. And working with my editor as well, having to do that. So I want to say thank you guys for being here and supporting this podcast. Those of you who listen, it really does mean a lot to me that you take the time out of your busy week to join in this conversation and listen to what myself and the guests have to say, because I think it is an important conversation, and it takes time, it takes money, it takes energy to bring this together. And so the fact that we have made it to 100 episodes is just, it is a milestone we should be celebrating. So thank you for celebrating it with me. For this episode, I want to take a look back about the journey of the podcast and some really great things that I have learned along the way, because this has been something I've learned a lot from. So selfishly, the conversations that I've had on this podcast honestly are reason enough for me to keep going. And the fact that I get to share them with you just expands that immensely. When I first started this podcast, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was still postpartum with my youngest. She was about 7 or 8 months old, I believe. Yeah, that'd be right. And I was really having a hard time. And I think I've talked about that a little bit on the podcast before, that coming out of that pregnancy and the newborn stage with her and knowing that she was going to be our last, it was a hard transition for me. I just didn't know what life looked like next. It was like, well, I'm not having babies anymore. What does my role look like on the farm? How does that change? And I didn't have any answers. I didn't know where I fit. I didn't know what my goals or my purpose was. And I didn't know really how I was going to get any closer to the things that I cared about and the things that I wanted to happen on our farm, especially for my kids. So, didn't anticipate getting emotional here. But that it struck a really deep chord with me. And I had not ever really talked about agriculture in my business before. My business was marketing, and that's who I helped. I helped any business who contacted me needing help with their marketing. Now, some of those were ag related, some of them were rural businesses, but I didn't place a focus on it. When I reached this point, when I was postpartum with my youngest, that I realized that this was an integral part of my life and something that if I wanted to accomplish my dreams and goals in, I was going to have to make a big shift to bring it front and center. And so starting the podcast was a small step I took in that direction to try to discover what that looked like for me and how other people were doing it. Honestly, I wanted to know these other people that I saw online or in person or heard about from friends and family and other guests on the show, how they were doing it, how they were being successful at living out their purpose on their farm, on their ranch, in their agriculture profession. And so that's kind of where this all started. And the conversations that I had have opened up my eyes in so many ways to things that I didn't know I needed to know about agriculture. Where the show is now, when I think back, like when I started this, we were at our old house, our old farm that was 20 acres. We were trying to figure out how to expand our cow herd. We were renting grass. We were really just kind of at a loss as to how we were going to expand and grow and have a hope of having our kids involved in the production side of agriculture. And now, about 2 years later, a little over 2 years later, we are in my husband's family farm. My kids are going to be the 7th generation here if they choose to be. And we have made a lot of the things that we wanted to come true. And even just saying that kind of makes me pause for a moment. We are not very good around here at pausing and looking at how far that we have come. But when I think back to just 2 years ago, where we were at to where we're at now, it's taken a huge effort. It's been a very big weight to lift, but we have made a huge difference in the trajectory of what our lives looks like and opportunities that are available to our kids one day. So that's kind of been a big change for me. And I appreciate that you guys have been along for the ride listening as, I drop, I'm sure, little pieces of our life into different episodes and that you've shared in that with me.
Does your business accept online payments, credit cards, or bank transfers? You're going to want to know about a tool called ThriveCart. I've been using this tool on my own website and on clients' websites for years and have been so happy with it. ThriveCart is a software tool you can use to design online checkouts with every option you can dream up. You can sell physical and digital products, connect to loads of other softwares you use for your website, accept payments, email marketing, and more. This is the most powerful tool that I use and the lowest cost one for my business. I recommend it for anyone who accepts online payments, who wants to increase their revenue or average order value on any type of product that you sell. In my show notes, you can find an affiliate link that I have for ThriveCart that gets you a great deal on a one-time payment, no subscription, and also allows me to earn affiliate income from this tool that I really enjoy and recommend. If you have any questions about how ThriveCart could work for your business, feel free to shoot me an email and I'd be happy to chat with you about it. Now, back to the show.
The other thing that I want to share with you are a few things that I've learned from the guests that have been on the show. The very first one of those is the importance of focusing on priorities versus focusing on goals. And this is something that I wish I'd understood better at a younger age, and that I think leadership development type things probably could benefit from maybe shifting their focus on. We focus a lot on goals, on setting something that we want to achieve in life. And this is talked about in sports, in school, in organizations, personal development, self-development books. We talk a lot about goals and being goal-oriented and being a go-getter and, seeing what you can achieve in life and always focusing on what that goal down the road is. But what I have learned over the course of this podcast is that the goals are not necessarily the part that's the most important. I think the most important thing is focusing on what our priorities are, because those priorities give us a purpose even when goals become unattainable or the course shifts or something happens in life that changes our trajectory. If we know what our priorities are, we can choose to focus on those every single day. If we know what our priorities are, we can use those priorities to get to our goals. But it makes sure that every single day is spent the way that we want to spend it, instead of always being focusing on that achievement. And I think it leads to a more balanced life. And I've seen and heard this in so many of the interviews that I've done. I don't think it's ever something that someone has outright said, but I think it's something that has been a part of so many interviews, just really focusing every day on what things are most important to you. The second one that I have learned about is the time factor in agriculture and understanding the long-term nature of farming. And I think this is something that we all kind of know in the back of our mind. But when you're a young or beginning farmer, or you're working on a transition or expanding, it kind of, if you forget, you need reminded that things don't happen overnight. Things take so long to build in agriculture. And part of that is because of the asset requirements that are needed to be successful and to be able to accomplish what you need to accomplish. And part of it is just because change in agriculture of even the smallest things takes a lot of time. Just changing the methods that you use on one field can take multiple seasons to do in a way that is not detrimental to your budget for the year. So real change, the kind of change we want to see, can take years and years to actually realize. And hearing that from different people on the podcast has been another thing that's been kind of just under the surface of all the interviews, that it doesn't just happen in a couple of years. As a beginning farmer, you're investing decades of your life to get to the point where you want to be. And if you're doing it faster than that, I am so happy for you. And I'm so in awe of your achievements that you're able to do there. It's just not possible for so many of us in agriculture, though, for various reasons, just from the limit of your assets, from the limit of the income that you can invest in the farm to make those kind of changes, to the amount of labor you have available on your farm day to day to still get the crops in, the calves taken care of, to get the money in that you need for that year while also trying to make big changes for the next year. It's hard and it takes a long time, and patience is just about the only thing that I think is worth even considering in agriculture as a long-term plan. Patience is really important. And as I look back on some of the perspectives that I've had on generational farming, of, thinking that the young generation has to wait too long to get to the point where they get to start farming, I still think that's true. I still think we cannot have farmers and ranchers starting their independent business or taking over their business at 60 years old. That's just not sustainable as an industry. But I understand why it happens. Some of the financial realities that we've talked about on the show are just undeniable. Building capital over time is one of the only ways that farmers and ranchers have been able to expand. Unless there are extenuating circumstances, that's just the only way that it happens. So expanding your farm enough that another generation can join you takes that long. It takes so long to get to that point. And I also understand from the perspective of the previous generation that they work that long and then they don't get to enjoy any of it. My husband and I were making a joke the other day that, they say you have to either have your land paid off or your cows. If you're trying to make payments on both, the numbers just don't work. And we were kind of laughing about that because when we started out, that's exactly what we did. We had payments on both. And to think about that, at the time, we managed it because we both had off-farm income and were able to make it work. Since we've expanded, there's no way that would ever work for us. We would not be able to make it work at the scale that we are at now. And I understand now that, at 60, for a lot of farmers, that was the first time that they had money of their own. Up until that point, they'd been managing these immense payments on equipment or livestock or land, or sometimes all three. And so when you get to 60 and you've put in enough time to build up that equity and pay off your loans and have the things that you need to farm, whether it's nice or not, or as good as you would like to have or not, that's the first time when you really have money that you control versus have to work with a partner at the bank or, something like that, or make payments on. And it's something that I think we need to be more aware of and be more communicative of in agriculture, that is why it's like that. We hear a lot of people say, the previous generation, they just don't want to let go. They don't want to let go. Well, that's why. They have worked their entire life for the opportunity to get ahead. And they finally start to get ahead around 55 or 60. So I don't blame them for not wanting to think about retirement at that point. they're just finally hitting their prime as far as farming goes. So just knowing that is some of the backstory behind things, I think helps me understand agriculture from a different perspective than I did when I started this podcast. The other things that I think have been really important factors or stories that we've uncovered in the podcast is the current state of agriculture. We are at a huge crossroads in our food system, and I walk a very, very delicate line with that on the podcast. I have very mixed opinions about where we are at with our food system right now. And I am one who likes to have tons and tons and tons of research and things like that, information to form my opinions. And we start to realize that some of the things that we've formed our opinions on in the past were not based on anything. We're not researched. We're not backed up by anything at all, really, other than someone's opinion at the time. And so when we start to realize that, I think it puts us at a cool place in agriculture that we get to choose the path forward as an industry, but also a really difficult place because we have to agree. We have to find places of commonality so that we can move forward and figure out what a stronger food system looks like and what feeding people and balancing that with taking care of the environment and balancing that with taking care of farm families and their ability to make a living. That's a hard place to be. We don't have an easy path ahead for us with that, but we do have an exciting path ahead with that.
Hey there, it's Lexi, and I am sliding into this podcast episode with an opportunity for those who are interested in it. The last time that you sat down to plan your marketing, do you know when it was? Was it hard? Were you confused? Did you feel like you actually should be working on your business instead of trying to make social media posts or write emails or design ads? If that's you, I created a system to develop a full year's marketing strategy and a plan to implement it in 8 hours or less. Yes, really, 8 hours, one day. Sit down, plan all of your marketing for the entire year, and actually have the things in place so you can implement it, not just a really pretty outline on a calendar. So you'll walk away with a roadmap for your marketing activities for the next 12 months, confidence in knowing exactly what to do and when to do it, and more time to focus on actually running your business instead of worrying about your marketing. So if you are tired of just winging it or getting stressed out by trying to remember to do your marketing, check out this offer. You can find out when it's ready at farmingonpurpose.com/plan. farmingonpurpose.com/plan. I'd love to see you there.
The differences that are on the spectrum of what people think about the food system are so vast that we have a lot of work cut out for us. And these kinds of things have always been there. But I think since in probably the past 30 to 40 years, they have become incredibly more apparent that we have very different opinions about what the priorities in our food system are, about what the priorities in our food are, and how we tackle global feeding, feeding the world, feeding our nation, feeding our neighbors, and how we do that sustainably and how we do it efficiently in a way that is best for our bodies and best for people getting food in their mouths. So often you may hear on my podcast episodes that I ask questions carefully because I don't ever want to add fuel to the fire in the debate about food. I want to have productive conversations. And it is a very emotional topic, especially for the people who are producing it, because they are so passionate about the way that they do things. And I think that's good. But I also think we have to be able to have conversations about why we do things the way that we do and what is driving those decisions to be able to move forward. And that's something I'm going to continue to try to do in the next 100 episodes, is facilitate those conversations about why people do things a certain way on their farm, on their ranch, to to try to make a stronger food system, make a stronger opportunity for their family, and learn from that and be willing and open to change, even if it's different than what maybe I was taught or what I have learned or what my perspective is. And I hope that you, as a listener, also feel those conversations and are willing to hear different perspectives about them too. The next thing that I've learned about is the entrepreneurship factor. So entrepreneurship is one of my favorite things to talk about on the podcast. You will probably notice in a lot of the stories that are shared here, a lot of the guests have this in common, this entrepreneurial push or drive to try to find a niche market or to try to find a slightly different way of doing things that helps them to make more profit or be able to invest in their operation differently, to do things the way that they want to do it as a business owner. And historically in agriculture, that was so much more common. That was every farm you went to up until probably the 60s, 50s, probably 60s, 70s, I would say, when we started to have more of this streamlining of agriculture, that it increased efficiency in a lot of ways, but it decreased the entrepreneurial spirit in agriculture. And I think having more of that is one of the things that could be a big factor of change in the food system. The decline in independent decision-making in agriculture because of the decline in opportunities to do that is just astonishing. We have federal regulations, we have state regulations about how food can be sold, about where it can be sold, about who it can be sold to. And because of that, the cost to be an entrepreneur in agriculture is high. And it's been almost completely wiped out of the consumer mindset. We're starting to see some of it come back. But again, it's going to take a long time in agriculture to make those kinds of changes, to see the opportunity for people to have an entrepreneurial mindset and have different ways that they can sell their products in agriculture. So hearing those kinds of stories where people are able to make that work and figure out a way to do it on their farm are some of the most favorite stories that I have to share here. And I think as we see so much of the industry push for that corporatized approach, it's going to be even more important because the relationships are what really, really matter when you talk about business to consumer marketing and being able to sell your product off the farm to different people besides, the couple buyers who are willing to take your product. These systematic approaches that are being invested in the food system and have been invested in for decades have increased efficiency and have decreased the ability of the farmer and rancher to make independent decisions. So it's no wonder that we are where we are at this point, where we're losing farms and ranches, because we've virtually removed the opportunity for profit. In insurance, they say, we've insured ourselves out of a profit because we're so focused on covering our costs. And I think that's kind of what we've done. And I hope it's something that can be part of the picture moving forward in agriculture is these entrepreneurial stories that you hear on the podcast. Those are the people that we need to be paying attention to. Those are the people that are looking ahead and are finding those niche ways to return to independent decision-making and entrepreneurship on their farm to make a better life for themselves. The last thing that I want to focus on today, and that I'm going to be focusing on in the next 100 episodes really, really intentionally, is the power of positivity in agriculture. I was working on a client the past couple of weeks on a project for them that had to do with agriculture media. And when you look as a whole at the stories that are presented in ag media and in ag news on a day-to-day basis, finding even one positive story when you look at months of stories is very challenging. I had never really noticed this about ag media specifically before, but it could be influenced by the fact that it's an election year. But I don't seek out news a lot. I go looking for things when I need to find things out, but I don't pay attention to news outlets specifically just for the intent of keeping up with what's going on because of the negativity that I often see in the news. But when you look at ag news specifically, it's almost worse than just the general news that you see on the TV or the radio or in the newspaper day to day. We are a very pessimistic bunch in agriculture, and a lot of the stories are sensationalized. Media plays on that fear mindset of producers to always expect the worst or always plan for the worst and try to be conservative. And I think that's just so damaging to us in agriculture, to just be surrounded by this thought that, are we even going to be able to make it to the next season? Because we don't know what nature is going to bring. We don't know what the markets are going to bring. We don't know what the political environment is going to bring. We don't know if there's going to be screwworms in Mexico. We don't, all of this stuff. And all of the news stories being so negative, just what opportunity do we have for light in agriculture? What opportunity do we have for finding that source of inspiration? If we don't have it in the media, if we don't have it in the content that we're consuming, then it's not there. And it's no wonder then that suicide and mental health is such a concern in agriculture. We have to remember to focus on the positive and to focus on the good things. And so that's another really important shift that I would like to take on the podcast. It's something that I have to focus on and choose every day because I am not naturally a very positive person. I am definitely a worst case scenario type of person, which, there's a time and a place for that. And there's a benefit in that when you think about planning for things, but it's not a good way to live your life. And so shedding light and positivity through stories of farmers and ranchers who are doing good things, who are finding success, is what I'm going to be focusing on in the next 100 episodes. So I hope that you continue to join us here weekly for these podcast episodes. I greatly appreciate your listenership and you just being willing to spend a little bit of your week with me. If you want to be part of the conversation, if you want to shed light on more positive things in agriculture, I would invite you to our Facebook group, Farming on Purpose on Facebook, or to follow along on social media, on Instagram at Farming on Purpose, or on TikTok. I think my handle is Right at the moment there, with Right being spelled like my last name. But I just really appreciate anybody who has listened or contributed in a small way by buying Farming on Purpose merch on the website. We don't make a lot of money from the merch, but to me, it's more about the fact that you are willing to be part of the story and part of the mission of this podcast, that you support us in that way. So thank you guys so much for being here. I would love to know what you think of episode 100 of Farming on Purpose and of the mission that we're going into our next 100 episodes with. Thanks so much. Have a great day, guys.
If you've enjoyed spending time with us today, please take a moment to review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or join the conversation on social media. Do you have a topic you would like to discuss or know someone with a story to share? Apply to be a guest on the podcast at farmingonpurpose.com. You can follow the host of Farming on Purpose, Lexi, on your favorite social media platforms for more content by searching for Farming on Purpose. And remember, if you look around your table and aren't inspired by the people there, it's time to find a new seat.